There's something extraordinary about the way a woman can perceive change, not necessarily in words or even actions, but in this energy between you. Not just intuition in some vague, mystical sense. It's finely attuned emotional perception. Women, especially those emotionally invested in a man, pick up on subtle nuances that men tend to overlook in themselves. A shift in how long you hold eye contact, the tone of your voice when you say her name, even the pacing of your responses. These are small things, but to her, they mean everything. Now, you might think you're being discreet. You might assume that since you haven't said anything or haven't been caught doing anything overt, everything is still under control, missing the fundamental truth of human interaction. Our psychology speaks far louder than our words. A woman who cares about you will sense the dissonance before you even admit it to yourself. She notices the gap, the delay, the hesitation. She notices the new burst of confidence that seems to come from nowhere, or the slightly distracted way you smile, like your mind is somewhere else. That's because, for a woman, relational context is not background noise, it's the foreground. It matters. She's scanning not for evidence, but for meaning. And when you start to invest part of your emotional energy somewhere else, whether physically or just mentally, she feels it like a current pulling her out of sync with you. And you might not even realize you're doing it. Maybe you met someone new. Maybe you're just wondering what if? But she'll feel it. And once she does, thing changes. This isn't paranoia. This isn't insecurity. This is the result of emotional calibration that women develop to protect themselves, to stay safe, to stay connected to what matters. If you've ever been close to a woman, truly close, you'll know what I mean. She doesn't need hard evidence to know something's off. She knows it when you kiss her goodnight and it feels a little empty, when your laugh sounds a little forced, asking questions about her day like you used to, or when you start using your phone just a little too much at dinner. It's all cumulative. Stacks up until the truth behind your silence becomes louder than anything you could say. And once she senses that shift, she enters into a different mode of being, alert, attuned, watching. Not out of vindictiveness, not out of suspicion, but because her heart is on the line. And people protect what matters to them. You've stepped into uncertain terrain now. The bond has been disturbed, and whether you meant to or not, you've created a fracture. And she feels it like a pulse beneath the surface of the relationship. At that point, it's not just about what that shift represents. She starts to question what's real. Was the connection ever as mutual as she thought? Was she ever really safe with you? Or were you always keeping one foot out the door, waiting for the next best option? Her mind runs not because she's aware. She's trying to make sense of something that no one is saying out loud, but that's screaming between every line of silence. And here's the thing. You may think you're just exploring something new or following your feelings, but to her, you're signaling a loss of priority, of presence, of trust. Once a woman feels that even if she doesn't confront you immediately, her entire world shifts in response. She already knows, you just haven't admitted it yet. It's easy to dismiss a woman's reaction as overblown, irrational, maybe even dramatic. That's a mistake. And not just a small one. It's a deep misunderstanding of what's actually happening beneath the surface. Her reaction, whatever form it takes, is not random, not coming out of nowhere. It's the product of something very real emotional disruption. You've changed the rhythm of the relationship, maybe subtly, but to her, it feels like an earthquake. So when she lashes out, goes quiet, pulls away, or starts asking questions that seem loaded, not because she wants to punish, it's because she's trying to orient herself in the middle of emotional chaos. Think about it. If someone you trust starts acting differently, less engaged, less present, you're not just dealing with their behavior, you're dealing with the implications. And implications are terrifying because they force you to look at the story you thought you were living and question whether it's still true. That's what she's confronting. She's not just reacting to your distance, she's responding to the threat of being emotionally abandoned. And when that threat hits, the nervous system responds. You feel it in the body. Tight chest, restlessness, tears, or silence. She's not choosing those responses. They're choosing daughter's hurt. Emotional bonds, real ones, carry immense psychological weight. When a woman loves, she's not doing it halfway. She's often built part of her identity, part of her safety around the connection she has with you. So when she senses it slipping, her world doesn't just get shaky. It starts to fracture, not weakness. That's the cost of vulnerability. And when someone's been vulnerable with you, when they've let you in and chosen to trust you, their reaction to betrayal, or even the threat of betrayal, is never going to be neat and composed. It's going to be real. And real isn't always pretty. And tragic in a way is that a woman will often turn her reaction inward before she turns it outward. Before she accuses you of anything, question herself. Did I do something wrong? Did I stop being enough? Is this my fault? And that's the part you probably won't see, collapse. Because by the time you do see her reaction, it's already passed through the filter of confusion, of hurt, and of trying to make sense of something that doesn't quite make sense. She's not reacting just to you. She's reacting to the feeling of suddenly becoming invisible in the eyes of someone she still sees. What so many men misunderstand. You think she's overreacting to nothing, but it's not nothing. The emotional evidence you've left behind without even realizing it. She's piecing together your silence, your distance, your new distractions. And when she asks you what's wrong and you say, nothing, you're not calming her down. You're invalidating her reality. That's worse than telling the truth, because now she doesn't just feel pain. She feels crazy for feeling it. So what does she do? Maybe she fights. Maybe she withdraws. Maybe she suddenly becomes colder, sharper, more distant than you've ever seen her. Don't mistake that for her being done. Indifference, it's armor. She's bracing herself for the confirmation she already suspects is coming, that you've moved on, that she's been replaced. Everything she built with you is being quietly dismantled while she stands there trying to hold on to it. Her reaction makes perfect sense because in her mind, she's already losing something that mattered more than words could ever explain. When a woman senses you've turned your attention elsewhere, whether emotionally, physically, just in your imagination, something deep inside her begins to stir. And one of the first things that happens is this quiet, invisible process of comparison. Not because she wants to compete, not because she lacks confidence, but because she's trying to make sense of something that doesn't fit. The story she believed about the relationship is being challenged, and the mind demands an explanation. So she starts searching. She wonders who this other woman is, what she looks like, how she talks, what she does that maybe she doesn't. And that's a painful place to be because suddenly she's no longer just relating to you. She's relating to this imagined version of someone else and questioning herself in the process. Not always outwardly, not always in words, but internally there's a realignment happening and it can be brutal. She'll replay conversations you've had. She'll revisit moments that you used to feel safe and start doubting them. Was he really with me in that moment? Was he already thinking about her back then? These are just passing thoughts. They're emotional tremors that start to shake the foundation she thought she could stand on. Important to understand that this kind of comparison isn't rooted in vanity. It's rooted in loss. The potential loss of attention, affection, and emotional safety. The possibility that someone else now holds the key to the parts of you that used to belong to her. That's devastating. And the worst part is she may not even know who this other woman is. The unknown amplifies the pain. She imagines someone better, prettier, more exciting, less flawed. She imagines the version of herself that you might have wanted more. And in doing that, she starts to see herself through a distorted lens. Emotional betrayal does. It distorts identity. It doesn't just break trust. It breaks how someone sees themselves. Now, she might not show any of this. You might not even notice the shift right away. But it's there in how she dresses, in how she speaks, in the way she begins to second guess what used to come naturally. Maybe she gets quieter. Maybe she gets sharper. Maybe she asks questions that seem unrelated, all driven by the same need to reclaim a sense of clarity in the midst of emotional fog. She's looking for a mirror that tells her she's still enough, but that mirror, the one that used to be you, has started to reflect something else. When that reflection changes, everything changes. Suddenly, she's living in a world of comparison she didn't choose. A world where she's evaluating herself not on her own terms, but on the terms set by your shifting attention. That's not just sad, it's disorienting. She remembers who she was before she felt replaced. And now she has to reconcile that woman with the one who's left behind, wondering why she wasn't enough to hold your gaze. This kind of internal conflict isn't loud. It's not always dramatic. But it's persistent. It wears her down in quiet moments when no one's watching, when she's alone with her thoughts. And the tragedy is she might still love you through all of it. Even as she compares herself to someone she's never met, even as she tries to measure up to an invisible standard, she's still holding on to some version of hope. Every comparison chips away at that. Every imagined flaw, every internal question, every what does she have that I don't? It takes something from her. She's left wondering if you ever saw her clearly at all. A woman starts to feel like she's no longer your priority when she senses, even subtly, that your interest is drifting elsewhere. She doesn't just sit with that feeling quietly. Not if she still cares. Not if she still believes there's something left to fight for. What she does, often without even realizing it, is begin to test the relationship. Not out of spite, not to manipulate, but to verify, to determine whether what she's feeling is real or just a false alarm. She's searching for evidence, but not in a way that's always conscious. It's emotional, instinctive. She's trying to measure your presence against the distance she feels. That often means she'll start watching more closely, responding more carefully, behaving in ways that don't always make sense at first glance. You'll notice it in her questions. They'll seem simple, maybe even casual. Where were you? Who were you with? Why didn't you answer earlier? But those aren't really logistical questions. They're emotional barometers. She's not just asking where you were. She's asking if your mind was with her while you were there. She's not looking for control. She's looking for reassurance, for confirmation that she's not imagining the shift that's already taken place. And then sometimes the testing gets more complicated. She may start pulling away a little just to see if you notice, if you care, if you'll lean in when she leans out. Or maybe she'll become more distant, not because she doesn't want you, but because she's trying to protect herself from being blindsided by the pain she suspects is coming. She's bracing. She's preparing for impact. The only way to prepare is to reduce the exposure, to pull her heart back just enough that it doesn't shatter if it turns out she's right. Other times might go the opposite direction. She'll become more attentive, more affectionate. She'll make more of an effort. Not to win you back, necessarily to give you a chance to respond, to choose her again. She's looking for proof that what you had is still alive. But that effort is coming from a place of anxiety, not peace. It's an attempt to stabilize something that already feels like it's tilting, and it's exhausting. Because deep down knows that love offered as a test is never fully received. Still, she tries. Because if there's even a chance she can pull you back with tenderness, with care, what she knows you once loved, she'll take it. It's also in the little moments. The way she suddenly becomes sensitive to things she used to shrug off. How she pays attention to your phone more than usual. How she watches the way you talk about other women. How she notices when you seem distracted in conversation. These are all subtle forms of testing, emotional litmus strips. She's searching for the truth that you're not saying out loud. Not because she wants to trap you, but because she wants to understand what story she's living in now, the old one where she was safe and chosen. Or the new one, she's slowly being replaced. What most men miss is that this testing doesn't mean she doesn't trust you. It means she wants to trust you And something inside her is struggling too. It means she's hoping, maybe desperately, that she's wrong. The signs she's picking up on are just noise and not signals. But every unanswered question, every vague response, every emotional withdrawal on your part pushes her one step closer to believing what she doesn't want to believe. So if you notice her behaving differently, pulling you in one moment and pushing you away the next, don't write it off as mood swings or games. Understand it for what it really is, a heart trying to find out if it's still being held. Often goes unnoticed when a woman senses you've found someone else is the dramatic shift in emotional power that begins to take place. You may not feel it at first, the one doing the drifting. You're the one whose attention is wandering, whose emotional investment is subtly reallocating. And in that moment, you hold more power than you probably realize. Not because you're doing something right, but because you've introduced instability into the dynamic. And instability always alters the balance. She can feel it. The emotional equilibrium that once existed between you starts to tip. She used to count on your consistency, your warmth, your attentiveness become less dependable. And with every sign of your detachment, sense of agency in the relationship starts to erode. This isn't about control. It's about grounding, about knowing where she stands with someone she's trusted with her heart. And when that begins to vanish, she's left to navigate a kind of emotional freefall. Here's the paradox that loss of grounding doesn't always look like desperation. Sometimes it looks like defiance. Because for many women, when they feel like they've lost the emotional upper hand, when they're no longer the one being pursued, prioritized, or cherished, there's a reaction. Sometimes subtle, sometimes not. She might get colder, sharper, more distant. She might stop reaching out first. She might start investing her energy elsewhere, into her career, her friends, her appearance, not as revenge, but as a way to reestablish her own center of gravity. In her mind, if you've stopped choosing her, then she needs to remember how to choose herself again. And that's the part many men don't see coming. You thought she'd always be there, that the bond you built was strong enough to carry you through some emotional wandering, that she'd wait around while you sorted yourself out. But the shift in power you triggered doesn't pause when you're unsure. It moves fast. If she reaches the point where she believes she's no longer desired, if she truly feels replaced, then she starts to reframe the relationship itself. She stops trying to hold on and starts preparing to let go. That doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual. A recalibration of emotional investment. She used to lean in. Now she's leaning out. She used to respond instantly. Now she takes her time. She used to ask you about your world. Now she barely comments. Passive, aggressive tactics. They're symptoms of a deeper recognition that the connection she once counted on is slipping away. She doesn't want to be caught standing still while it does. What's hard to admit, especially for men, is that when your attention shifts, just her feelings that change. It's the whole structure of the relationship. The admiration, the intimacy, the vulnerability, it all starts to dissolve. Once that happens, she doesn't just lose faith in ZU. She starts to lose faith in what the two of you ever were. That's a different kind of loss. Reshapes how she sees herself and what she deserves. Eventually, that imbalance becomes unsustainable. The woman who once opened herself to you, who gave without hesitation, who believed in the future you painted together, she begins to see herself in a different light. Not as someone waiting to be chosen, as someone who will walk away if she isn't. When a woman finally accepts that you've found someone else, or at the very least, that you're no longer emotionally invested in her, something irreversible happens inside her. It's not loud. It's not even always visible at first. But it's deep. Shift in the way she sees you and in the way she understands the connection that once held you together. Shift isn't just emotional, it's existential. Because when you've loved someone deeply and begin to disappear before your eyes while still standing in front of you, it alters your sense of reality. And once that change is accepted, not just suspected, not just feared, but sex accepted, you're no longer dealing with the same woman. You see, up until that point, she's still trying. She's still hoping, still offering you chances to come back, to show her that the distance is temporary, that the emotional absence is repairable. Every conversation, every quiet look, every attempt to connect, those are doors she's keeping open, waiting to see if you'll walk back through. But once she accepts that you won't, thing in her closes. And what's crucial to understand is that she doesn't always slam the door. Sometimes she just lets it drift shut, slowly and silently. Once it's closed, it rarely opens again. That's the part men underestimate. They assume there's always more time, more space, more grace. And for a while, there is. The moment she stops fighting for the relationship is the moment you've lost something far more important than her presence. You've lost her belief in you. That's the foundation of everything. Once she no longer believes in who you are, in what you were building together, the rest of it crumbles almost on its own. Not because she wants it to, but because she has to let it go in order to survive emotionally. And here's the twist. When she reaches that level of clarity, she might not even be angry. That rage you were bracing for, that confrontation you feared, it doesn't always come. Instead, what you're met with is silence, peace. Even, not the kind of peace that means everything's okay. It's the peace that comes from emotional detachment. The kind that says, see things clearly now, and I'm done holding on to something that's already gone. You may try to come back at that point. You may realize too late what her presence meant, what her consistency gave you, how much her emotional depth grounded you. But what you'll find is that the version of her that would have accepted you back, the one that waited, that hoped, that questioned herself, that version is gone, replaced by someone who had to rebuild herself piece by piece after being emotionally sidelined. And that woman doesn't make space for ambiguity. Not anymore. You're left with is the echo of what once was, a memory of someone who gave you everything while asking only for your attention, your honesty, your loyalty. And in the end, when she finally walks away, she does it with a strength that can only come from having once been broken. That's the irony of it. The very pain she felt when she sensed your shift, that's what forged the resilience she now carries. Not in bitterness, but in truth.